We're going to be looking at two web apps, and for each example, we will look at the web page that it produces and also look at the code. Right, so this is a talk about how to build quick and dirty web apps. They're very, very lightweight, very small, and a really good starting point for people who are new to the language or new to programming in general. So I'll get stuck in. I'm going to set a little timer because it's quite difficult to keep track of time with Zoom. I haven't found the timer function on there. Anyway, so what are we looking at today? We're going to be looking at two web apps, and for each example, we will look at the web page that it produces and also look at the code at the back of it. The premises rather are that you have roughly 1 year experience programming, so you're still quite new. If you write kernels, compilers, or operating systems, that kind of thing, it's probably less aimed at you, but you might find some curiosities in here. But if you're new and you want to learn more about the Go programming language, then this might be useful for you. I also believe in, if it's easy to follow, you'll want to learn more. So simple and short. And maybe you've developed a few tools in your own time. For example, quite a long time ago, I built like a data transformation tool. It was a command line application. Not many people were interested in it. I wanted to add a user interface on top of it. That's just an example. You might be at that sort of level. And there are frameworks out there, but I think if you're new to programming, this is obviously it's open to each and every other, each person. But if you're quite new, you might think that they're a layer or two more complex. And this stuff that I'm showing you is entry level. So it's a great ramp upon which you can grow. So what do you need? You need a bit of HTML knowledge. So, basics, forms, buttons, text input, that sort of thing. You need a little bit of Go knowledge. So you need to know functions, the stuff I'm going to show you in the code really, which is, the basics, variables, functions, structs, and handles and stuff like that. And lastly, understanding of handlers and HTTP. So that's it. This is a sort of like I describe it as a Go web server, like it's a one that I haven't built yet in my own time, but one that you might want to build in the future if you're quite new. And there's quite a lot going on. So you've got a database, you've got a template engine, you've got a multiplexer like, I don't know, Gorilla Mux or something like that. And, it's quite complicated when you first look at it. And what we're looking at is something as simple as this. It's just one web page, a HTTP server, and behind that, Go logic. So here we go. I've got two examples. Hopefully this is enough for 20 minutes. If not, I can always go into more detail. But yes, so the first example is a small template. It's a web app, and it's very simple. It just takes text input and prints it back out to you on the web page. And it just demonstrates the whole process of user input, clicking a button, it's going into the Go code, and then it's being processed and presented back to you. So I'm going to switch to the code now. So here we go. Drag it over. Right. So let me just first of all go to code. Right. So I'm just going to run the server and then load it up so we can have a look at what we're talking about. There you go. So this is the server. It's just a input box and a button. And if you type in here, oh, look, I already have. If you type in something like hello world, it says you typed in hello world. So it's typing in input, clicking a button, and then it's taking that input, presenting it back to you. So it's a very, very simple user interface. So how are we doing that? If we look at the code, this is the code for this particular example. We've got struct, which stores the variables that are taking their place on the page. Got the HTML here for the page. the actual variable that we're working with up here is stored here in HTML. And then you've got this function, which I'll go into more detail in a second. You've got this function, which is called when you go to the main page, the / handler. And then you've got the main function down here. In here, you've got a signpost, just letting you know the server started. You set up a handle for the / and then you start up the server. So it's as simple as that, really. You can create a front-end web app very, very quickly using minimal lines of code. And I'll just go into a little bit more detail. So when we create this handle func here, the whole point of it is that when you go to the /, it will invoke this function here. And this function is a pretty standard sort of handling function that I've seen in my time. You follow a particular process where you pass the HTML, which is up here. If there's an error, print it out. Pass the contents of the form, which is this bit here, enclosed in the form section. And then got to validate the information in the form, which I'm doing with a separate function, which I've just called validate, which literally takes in the request and the name of the form. And it just returns it if there's nothing. If there's nothing in the form, just return false. But if there is data in the form which we can use, then return true. So if there's input, okay, then we can change the variable, which we talked about earlier up here, change this variable to the user input. And I've added a little string in here as well, which basically says you typed in plus the user input. Once you've done that, you execute that information and return it to the user, the end user, on the browser. And that's it in a nutshell for this one. Very, very quick, very easy. And it's just a demonstration of how to create a very, very short, sweet web app in Go. So just going to take a drink. I should probably say, if there are any questions, we'll go through them at the end, but I think you've already said that, Steve. So yeah, brilliant. Right, so moving on to number 2. I'm going to close down that. Move to this bad boy here. This one's a bit different. When you run it, it loads up the page for you. And this particular app has a little bit more functionality. So this app is a too long didn't read app. Basically, you can paste in an article and it will then summarize that article to a short, sweet bit of information for you to read. So I've actually got an example in here. Let me grab it. The summarizer, by the way, is using a external library produced by this person. So if you want to have a look at it, go to this link. But it's the library I'll be using in this app. And here's the article. So let's have a look at it. So the idea is that maybe I'm a really busy guy. I don't have time to read all this. It's pretty terrible. I probably should read all of it, but let's just use it as an example. I'm busy. I don't want to read all this. I want to get a succinct sort of like explanation of what it is. So what's the title? One thing you should never do while walking, says new research. So what's the one thing you should never do? Let's find out. Maybe I'll put 2. I'll explain what's going on in a second. I just want to make sure I get it. There you go. So it's saying here, well, a fascinating new study reveals why gazing down at your phone while walking in a public space among other people just isn't a good idea. So what's one thing you should never do while walking? Looking at your phone, just staring at it whilst walking. You might walk into a pole or something. So it's succinctly broken. It's basically pulled all this information and made it shorter. So what's going on here? This app, you've got an input. You can put some text in there. That passes it to the method in the library, which uses the LexRank algorithm to summarize the information. This bit up here is just how many paragraphs or how much information it will provide back to you. It looks like 1 in this case is too small, but changing it to 2 made it work. So that's what the app does. But let's have a look at the back end. So here's the code. Tiny bit more going on. So I'll just go through this one because there's a bit more to it. I guess the big thing that makes this one different is that you can quit the app quite easily using this channel here. So we've got a bool channel of just one size. And if I go down to the main function down here, what we're doing here is we're starting the server using a separate function, start HTTP server, using this port in a Go routine. And then we're running this function here, wait for quit, which basically waits for a message through the channel. And if you receive a message from the channel, it quits the app. So it's a bit cleaner than the other one. In the first example, you'd have to go to the console, do Control-C or something like that. But in this one, you've got a little exit here, little button. So if I click on that, server shuts down. You don't need to do Control-C. You can just close this window. And that's a slightly friendlier user interface. Still simple, but a bit friendlier. And also it loads up the page, which is just this one here, open browser, which basically switches based on your runtime. In this case, we're on Windows. So it will run this command and load up your default browser. So it's a little bit more, a little bit friendlier. And I think that if you were using this methodology to build web apps, you'd want to add these little bits of functionality so that it's more user-friendly, basically. But other than that, it's doing the same sort of thing. You've got 2 handlers. One's doing the main page, and then you've got this other one that has a handle called do stuff. It does stuff when you click on the submit button, and I'll go into that in more detail now. So just to show you these other functions. So we've got start HTTP server. Here it is. You'll see it's very, very similar to the other one where you're starting up a server. I've chosen in this app to use a channel to quit if there's an error. So basically, if there is ever an error, it just quits the app and it prints out the error. I don't know if everyone would do that, but that's what I've chosen here. And it's also mostly to demonstrate channels. And you'll see the channel sort of methodology being used quite a lot here. It's just to show the strength of channels in Go. So the other thing is the error handling. I've just put it in here. So instead of if error is not equal nil all the time, it's just in here. If the error exists, print the error, and then just return true if it is, false if it's not. And then outside of that, you're passing the true down the channel. And then you've got the validate, which is the same thing. I would like to know if there's another way to do this. We can talk about that afterwards, but the methodology I'm using here is validating the form data, and if it's good, true, else false. This is the function for the front page. Same as the old one, you've got the passing of the home page, passing of the form, and then returning it to you, the end user. And then this is the do stuff function, which basically passes the page again, and then it collects data from the form that is in the HTML. So we'll quickly look at that. Here's the HTML. Very, very short amount of code, not much going on here. You've got the form here. In the form, you've got the action, you've got the handle here, do stuff. So when you run the app, it will go to the main page and it will just load up the app. But when you actually click on the button, it will go to this function instead. It'll go to this handle, which will run the do stuff function. And then in here, you've got the text area where you can place your content. That is the variable up here. So I'll go into that in more detail, but when you do the TLDR function and make the data more concise, it will update this variable and print it back out to you. It will, print out the concise information. The 2 buttons are here. So you've got one button which is submit, which has a value of do TLDR stuff, pretty concise. And then you've got another button here, which is just exit. So how do you use multiple buttons? I'll explain that now. So in the do stuff function, we're running this function here, collect data from forms, and that's the function we'll look at. So in this function, we're passing the data really from the handle, and we are passing the form here, and then we're switching based on the button value. So if the button value is exit, exit equals true, and we're changing the output to goodbye server will shut down. So we saw that a moment ago on the web page. And if it's do TLDR stuff, then we're validating whether the form is empty or not. And if it isn't empty, then pass the data to the TLDR function. So this is where basically you can do whatever you want. Like in this example, here's the logic that is being used to to make the data more concise and present to you, simpler set of information. But you could do anything really. You could create a, this is just an example, but you could in your own time create a JSON to struct formatter, for example. That's just an example. I've got it on my website, but the possibilities are endless really. You can do anything. But yeah, that's passing the data to the TLDR function. So once that's done and you've got your concise information, that's pretty much the journey of the application in a nutshell. And this is a template that if you're completely new to using UIs for Go, it might be a good place to start and just play around with. And then from here, you might want to look at using like a template generator or something like that. But yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to go through on this particular example. So I'll go back to the slide. That's just the slide for that app, but I decided to leap ahead and talk about the app. As you can see, it's just concisely explaining what it does. So what you could do next is, you might have already done these, but you can set up your own website. I've got one here, which is it's a server using Hetzner, I think, but there's loads of different companies you can use, and it's Linux, and it's basically a collection of Go microservices, Go web apps working together to present like a complete website for someone to view and enjoy. It's got loads of different examples on there, like a music app. There's a photo album app. Let's have a look at it actually, briefly. I understand I'm on the clock. I think I've got time there. Looking at the, I've got a little timer down here. Still got 10 minutes, so it might be an opportunity to just go around the website a little bit. So this is my website. I like to go down the simplistic sort of hacker vibe, I guess, but it's composed entirely of Go web apps. So not just one, lots of them. And in here, just various different tools that I've got, which I've built using Go. And in there, you've actually got the TLDR one. I just thought I'd put it in my website. If I'm on Reddit and the TLDR bot didn't get to the content that I'm looking at, and it's like 4 or 5 paragraphs long, I can just paste it in here, and it will it would typically give me a concise sort of explanation of what the original person's trying to convey if I don't have the time to read it all. Then you've got this, which is what I was talking about a moment ago. So if you paste a JSON in here, it will create a converted struct that you can paste into Go. So it's just a nifty tool. There are examples on the internet of this being done, but I thought I'd build it myself. And this is what you can do with this methodology. Go apps. You can do very, very simple things. Apologies for the garish coloring. It's just my preference. And then I guess I'll show you the photo app. So in here are just the ability to have a quick look at some photos of my local neighborhood. This is just somewhere near me. The Go web app is generating thumbnails of each photo that I took, and you've got some CSS arranging it. Not only is the Go web app generating thumbnails, but when you click on it, you can look at a larger version. You can go through it. All Go. There's a little bit of JavaScript there, which is the key button pressing. Just do that. But apart from that, it's all Go, basically. And clicking back takes you back to the photos. That's Go. And this is also a Go web app using the same methodology I was talking about, just a bunch of my music. I'm using a Go package which converts the music into a picture of the wave over time. And then it formats it and creates a list. And that's just another example of that sort of methodology being used. It goes on basically, but I think that's enough examples. You can go for it, go nuts. You can build URL shorteners. I built one of them using this methodology. So yeah, it's a fantastic entry level sort of like method to just go nuts, apply your Go logic, all the stuff that you've learned, and then you can put a nice pretty front end on it, and it just takes you away. You can get started. The other thing I would recommend is maybe using JSON to save and load information. So what I mean by that is in here, got a struct like this, but you might want to, if you want to save information in your app, might want to do something like, type page struct. This is just an example. Output string. You might want to create your own struct and then bring it out like that. And that allows you to basically use, if you haven't used it before, you can marshal and unmarshal JSON into structs using Go. And before going into databases and using databases, this is something that you could do before that. It just enables you to, for example, I have in the past created a proprietary data parser, which converted this bizarre data set into CSV files for a company I used to work for. And every time it did that, it would create a suite of instructions for that specific file. And at the time, I wanted to save that data in the program. I didn't want to use a database because I thought, I want it to be local on the computer itself, and this was the best way to do it. So when I would run the application. Maybe I put in some data. It would generate instructions. Then I could save those instructions using the marshal to JSON, save JSON to a folder. I'm not going to show you the example now. I don't think I have time, but that's something I would recommend looking into if you're new to Go and you want to save information in your application. Right, most importantly, have fun. That's the most important thing. If you're having fun, you will do more, basically, and you'll keep learning. That's a little bit about me. I believe this will be shared at the end, so we can go into this in more detail. But yeah, one thing I want to highlight is please check out my music. I've got a SoundCloud. That's the link. Have a listen. Let me know what you think. And there's my code. You can go on GitHub and have a look. Critique it all you like.